Saw a sasquatch here in New Hampshire. It was just before sunset in the fall of last year. I went back out the next morning looking for sign and found a few tracks and some broken sticks. In my neighborhood, there's this creature. No idea what it would be, but it's shadowy and ultra black thing with yellow eyes that seem to be there and not be there. I live in the country, have seen it a handful of times while driving. Maybe a large house cat would be a good size comparison, or medium-sized dog, but it's ultra black, as if it's absorbing light. As my headlights hit it, it looked more black that way. It moved like an animal, so it could have been a known animal, but it was too freaky when I saw it. Something that black and seemingly light absorbing is hard to ID. When my family and I went on a little nature hike off trail, I saw a super black shaggy animal about the same size I saw through the trees. It seemed to dive into a hole when we got there. There was absolutely no trace of it. It was fall. The leaves were untouched, but I clearly saw it in the woods, maybe 30 feet from us. Nobody else saw it, and they didn't believe me when I told them. I saw an entity, a man-like figure. It looked like it had quills that flexed as it strided across the woodline in my backyard. It was jet black and looked like you could see through it. It also roared at me. Several strange experiences over the time frame. Just about lost my mind. We have black panthers here in western Illinois. When I was a little boy, probably 5 to 6, we were coming from Griggsville, Illinois, heading to Valley City. There's a big hill you have to go down to get into Valley City, hence the name Valley. Anyway, we were getting ready to go down the Valley Hill when this big doe jumped off a bank at a full run. Kind of slipped a little and was up and gone in seconds. Then out of nowhere, this black flash was right behind it. It jumped from the bank, landed in the middle of the road, and another jump, it was heading up the bank and over the fence. It was moving. We didn't know what it was. Mom told Grandpa. He said it was a panther. But we honestly never know. Parents were out drinking. We had family friends over. Bangs on the front door. We go to investigate. They start ringing from the back door. We hid in the basement bathroom till the parents got back. We don't know if it was pranksters, evil spirits, or maybe even the hairy man. My father used to work at the Old City Cemetery, and he would see ghosts walking around all the time. Once, though, one of his coworkers saw a horse and carriage going down the road at the cemetery. I took a house tour at the Samuel Miller home near Heritage High School. As we got upstairs, I felt hands grab my neck, and I couldn't breathe. I literally ran out of there. There's a family of Bigfoot in the woods near Sycamore Place, I've heard. There's an older guy who will sort of angrily tell you about it. He's no funny business. Just stay the heck out of those woods and keep your little piece of crap yappy dogs on a short leash. He can hear them sometimes. It's a family of them. And some people's cats have gone missing. Lynchburg University, there was an orb of light that would float up and down the stairwell in the dorm room that I stayed in. There was also creepiness in one of the other buildings. It was a little girl that would run around. Apparently there was a fire year, and the little girl died in that building. I've been told on Old Graves Mill Road, where the old mill was, people would see a woman walking and would stop to pick her up. While driving and talking to her, she would just disappear. I never experienced it myself. There used to be an old house on Route 666 in the forest that was abandoned at night. If you parked in front of it, you could see a light in one of the upstairs windows, and a figure would walk around. I did see that. I don't know if the house is still there. Skunk ape pushed down a tree at Bellamy Bridge after being out there for hours during a blood moon eclipse. We also recorded a large owl-like hoot that was meant to intimidate us. The white antique store on 29 South, on their second floor, I walked into one of their rooms, but I couldn't breathe. I felt overwhelming sadness and basically got out of there as quick as possible. I knew a lady that lived on Madison Street in an old gorgeous home. She swore she seen a ghost of a Confederate soldier in her home. We have a ghost in our house. His name is Tony, and he likes to watch people from the stairs. When he gets grumpy, he gives people nightmares, so I have to cleanse the house. A bear cat dropped out of the tree on me, my friend, and 3 dogs. It looked like a mutant coyote. At 3:15, I was outside on my back porch. I looked up in the sky over the field and thought I saw an eagle, but the head wasn't white, so I thought it was a hawk. It was circling around like they do. I wasn't afraid. I was going to get my Yorkie, but it put his wings next to the body and formed into a round disc, and it took off at the speed of light. It wasn't a hawk then. It looked like a flying saucer. It went real fast to the southeast. I don't know if it disappeared or just out of sight. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I saw 2 cross the Springbrook Road near Camp Kunjuwar back in 1999 and 2000. I still remember it like yesterday. It stopped me in my tracks, absolutely stunned, especially since I have never heard of the existence of such creatures. I'm glad I witnessed what most can only scoff at. Dogman encounter back in 1999. I was on the side of the road taking a piss. All honestly, I don't think I could even get a pic if I had a camera phone. It ran past me. At 15 yards to my right, the woods turned around and changed me. I ran as fast as I could to the car, yelling at my friend to get the hell out of here. It was big, and I could only hear every step it took. Not gonna lie, I got piss on me, my car, and my friend. When I was in my 20s, I lived in Leesburg, Ohio. Right outside of town was a railroad trestle that ran about 50 feet above Lee's Creek. Everyone used to go out there to shoot guns. Personally, I found the place a little creepy. I found out from an elderly neighbor that was there was a train wreck back in the early 1900s. Anyway, one time I was fishing under the trestle, I heard the most god-awful howl I had ever heard in my whole life. It actually faded into some sort of growl. Now at the time, I was carrying a .357 and a huge knife, and I hiked the hell out of there. I couldn't imagine a dog big enough to make a noise, and I've heard about every sort of 4-legged animal there is in North America. In 1994, I now know what I saw was a juvenile dogman. For years, I called it a tree monster as it leapt down from a 3-story pine tree onto a well house roof. It could not care less about our presence. It seemed much more preoccupied with smelling the air, and its ears twitched in all directions, especially the direction it had come from. And then one swift movement leapt to the ground and bounded down the creek bank, heading to the opposite direction of where it came. From my research 20 years now, I realize there's no way it did not smell us or sense our presence. To me, it seemed more preoccupied with whatever it was fleeing from behind it. I've had 2 encounters. The first one, me and my kids are howled and growled at so loudly it was terrifying. We jumped back into the van and honked the horn for an hour to scare it off before sprinting to the door. I've never heard anything so evil in my life. The second time, I saw one hiding in a ditch on a county road. I was 2 feet from the alpha and a few feet from 3 others, and I had a sword on the alpha. And after a couple seconds, I lowered it and actually felt safe around it. Too bad the 6 other people with me were scared frozen. It took off after a minute. Didn't hear it or see it leave. It moved so fast. But after everyone thawed out, we headed through the forest to get back to the car. But as we did, we were followed the whole way. I stayed back in the woods for a few minutes to try to get them to come over to me, but wouldn't. I didn't feel threatened at all. I had an encounter in Smiley, Texas. Saw this creature sitting on his haunches, and the head came up to my head level in the pickup. Had to be at least 5 feet off the ground, on his haunches. Made direct eye contact, turns his head as I left. No glowing eyes, but the face was almost like the Grinch from the Jim Carrey movie. Saw it driving home at 2 a.m., saw it again following day. At the same exact time in the morning coming home, it was sitting in the same exact spot. We locked eyes again. The third night, my truck broke down exactly at the spot where I saw the creature in 2 nights prior. It wouldn't crank, not even a battery light. I was terrified sitting in the truck for more than 10 minutes. The longer I wait, the more I started to panic. Finally started to get out of the car and start walking down a small county road for over 15 minutes. I was so terrified. Finally, a pair of light came, and it was a highway patrol who gave me a ride. End of my story, but it gave me night sweat for weeks. The eyes were human, but the face was not. Had a dogman lycan encounter at my father's house in middle school and lived through the encounter. This year I heard the loudest roar outside my apartments in the Trafalgar, Indiana area. I was in bed asleep and heard this loud roar. Jumped so fast, closed my window. It was a deep roar. Saw many weird elf entities while tripping on mushrooms, Hawaiian baby wood rose seeds, and dimethyltryptamine. We've had dogman encounters for over 10 years. The only thing they do is scare the crap out of us. They seem to like to scare us, look into our windows, and pee all over to mark our yard. They could have killed us 1,000 times, or our animals, but they don't. I once met one of these black-eyed kids' children through sleep paralysis. At 17, I often had sleep attacks. I was in the middle of an attack. I woke up to my arms outstretched over my blanket seized. I couldn't move or hardly breathe. I felt like I was being choked. In my peripheral vision to my left, I saw one of these black-eyed children. He was sitting on the left side of my bedroom near the armchair, knees tucked to his chest, arms folded on his legs. His hood was up, mildly covering his face. His clothes were tattered, dirty, and torn up. He was clearly injured, but he smoked calmly without any indication of stress or pain. The entire room felt unsettling, and like all the sound and warmth was sucked out of it. I asked him with strain, "Why are you doing this to me?" And he said, "Because you can see us." Coming out of the paralysis, I never have forgotten this. I'm now 25 and still remember this little boy. I still have sleep attacks. I had dream visitation from 3 black-eyed children. I saw them at distance walking toward my house and then at my door asking for help. I refused entrance and shut the door on them. This event took place in the Bryson City area. I live in Maryland and was considering a move to that area. I took that as a warning. I swear I met 2 black-eyed kids as a child. I was 10 years old and lived in a very rural area in Tennessee. Me and my buddy would always play in the woods and build tree houses. One day we were hanging out trying to roll up cigarettes from leaves. Obviously we were stupid kids, aha. But we were up in a treehouse and suddenly we hear someone say, "Hello," and then kind of just repeated it in unison for a minute and then asked if someone could play. We looked down and my buddy started crying after he saw them. I was just very confused and had a bad feeling. They were very pale and had very large black eyes and were completely naked. We latched the door and stayed in there until his dad came looking for us a few hours later on a quad. Never saw them since, but the image is burned into my mind. In the early 2000s, I was frying balls, but all 4 of us saw them and had the same experience, and only 2 of us were on anything. We were way out in the desert in Tucson. They came out of nowhere. A girl, about 12-ish, a boy, a little younger, started coming towards our car. We booked it out of there as fast as we could. One night, my dad and I were outside for some reason, and our old property was surrounded by woods. We heard children laughing and giggling. We were quickly made our way inside and locked the door. We've just been having some issues lately with things moving and seeing people and black mist type thing. Black mist meaning it looks like a person walking in and out of rooms. It's not scary feeling, so we just ignore it. I took pictures and I saw a young man in his early 20s. I saw his face only and it was clear as day. Samantha, our daughter, swears she has someone in her closet and she's been touched as well as I have. My husband hears what sounds like footsteps going up the stairs. and he has seen things in our mirror. As a kid, I seen the Hat Man in my room several times, and a few years ago, my cousin and his wife seen a large, fiery orb right in front of us. First time I saw him, we were out of town at the cousin's house. I was about 7 years old. The next morning, I told my parents and everyone, and no one believed me. They thought I dreamed it. Then years later, same guy, but this guy in my bedroom. He was leaning in my doorway to my room watching me sleep. All I remember is looking well dressed with a hat and fire red eyes. All I could see is a silhouette with a hat. Something lured my best friend into the woods during our 5th grade Mohican trip. Luckily, the counselor caught him sleepwalking. He probably would have become a missing person. I think the 2 kids across the street from my house growing up as a child were black-eyed children. They would come over at all hours of the night asking to use our restroom. Luckily, we never let them in. I saw a possessed man being prayed for. I watched as the preacher told it to leave in Jesus' name. I actually got to see it leave. It was attached to him like a stringy black sludge. As it stretched away, it had the head of what looked like the Egyptian dog god. A long time ago, I was suddenly awakened by a hand flowing over my face. Once awake, I viewed a person standing at the foot of my bed. Had a scarlet robe on and long hair. Could not see its face. Stayed 30 seconds or so and floated out my bedroom door. I got up and looked around the house, but it was nowhere around. I've never forgotten it, and at 70 years old now, I still wonder who it was. During a graduation party, a group of older kids came back to the house stunned. They said they saw a witch in the woods. It was right around the corner from a place called Sleepy Hollow. There was large black canine sightings there as well. I've had a close encounter with a demon in the corner of my bathroom when I was alone in my dark days. I was living alone at the time, and it was late at night. I was in my bed laying down watching TV, and I had to use the bathroom. So I got up and walked to the bathroom, and my toilet, like most people, was in the corner of the bathroom, and the sink had a mirror to the left of it. I walked past the mirror and the sink to go to the first toilet, and I glanced at myself in the mirror real quick like I always do. And I looked over to the toilet to make my way to it. When I first noticed in the corner was a black hole. Blacker than the night, blacker than anything I've ever seen. Like it literally looked like a black hole in space. When I noticed, I was still standing at the mirror, but I secondly noticed it took twice to look over and move closer and see what the heck it was. There was this demon smaller than me, about chin up instantly on me and grabbed me by both my shoulders, and I grabbed his and started shaking back and forth violently. But I held on and was in complete shock as it happened so fast and I had no time to react. Just like how fast it happened, it was over, and somehow I was back laying in my bed with the TV on the same show I was watching before I got up to go to the bathroom. I was so scared, I just pulled the covers up my head like a little boy and started praying till I fell asleep and woke up the next morning. That didn't really happen. The demon was smaller, only chin height, all black and burnt out ooze looking, no hair, but the most pearly, white, long, sharp teeth stacked perfectly in his mouth. That part I'll never forget because I was so surprised on how white they were and can remember them very vividly because how close he was to my face when he grabbed and shook me. Never seen that one again, but I have seen a witch before too, and it was a crazy experience if anybody wants to hear it. I've encountered an entity that mimically every movement and staring at me without eyes. It filled me with dread. It was so bizarre. I thought it was a hallucination until I saw the movie called Annihilation, and now I knew it was showing a real entity some people call sci-fi. Back in college, I used to do a nighttime radio show where I'd share scary stories with the listeners. One night, I was sharing stories like usual when I heard a scratching sound coming from the back of the media deck. I ignored it, thinking it was a bug. A few minutes later, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the mic to my left adjust itself to point downward. This time I was a bit more startled since there was no way that could happen. I was the only one in the entire building besides security. I again brushed it off. I continued my show, and while in mid-sentence, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black crowd start to materialize in the top left corner of the room. It kept getting bigger, and when I finally looked directly at it, I saw a white ball of light shoot out of it and fly behind where it disappeared. The black cloud disappeared too, and I never saw it again. Perhaps an angel protecting me? About 3 months ago, I had a dream of a fiery figure with an evil face. The only words he spoke to me was, "I am Azazel." Then I woke up. I was in a bad place at the time and put it down to stress and didn't think much of it until I started doing research on him. In a hotel room, I was often away for work and had to stay in different hotel rooms at that point in my career. I was just going to bed when the corner of my room filled with what looked like a black smoke. It came towards me and I was completely paralyzed with fear. Literally felt like it wanted to suck the soul out of me. I prayed. I spent the night awake. That was about 20 years ago. I could still remember very vividly the fear that was associated with it. At my aunt's house, a demon asked me for my soul. My aunt was a witch. God bless her soul. She died anyway, where we were arguing because I came from a Christian background. So one day, she told me when we were alone, just sit here on the couch and something is going to come to you. She left out the front door. Now there is no back door or side doors. So I see her down the long hallway and no lights are on and something is coming down the hall. When it got to where I could see it, it looked like my aunt in some ways, but its features were horrifying, especially its face was all disfigured. Asked for my soul as I sat there not believing what I saw, yet there it was. I said no. I belonged to God. I was bewildered, and it just turned and went back down the hallway. Went in one of those doors that she kept locked at all times. Geez, what a trip. No sooner than it left, she walked in the front door. I told her to ask me for my soul, and I said no. Then I left. Crazy, right? But it did happen. I was 15 years old in high school and didn't drink or do anything. I worked at a senior living home, and I've seen ghosts walk the halls, and I've seen a lot of dark shadows. The scariest feeling is having someone feel like they're standing right behind you, and turning around and nothing is there. This morning I was standing in the hallway and saw someone walking behind me. Double checked, and no one was in the hallway but me. Saw a pale crawler crossing the road with my headlights directly on it. It looked like Gollum or the creatures from The Descent. It looked wet and veiny. It was white skin, but I could see its blue veins. Very weird. 1980. It harassed our horses deep in the woods. Saw it throw a tree up in the air after uprooting it while running using only one hand. Got some great looks in between my horse going crazy. It was screaming and howling. Got within 60 feet. It was almost 10 feet tall. Around 1,000 pounds, black with chimp-type hair with a sort of point on top of its head and a sloped forehead. I lived around Lake Erie for about 5 to 6 months. Lots of weird crap going on. Could be out there. Feeling of unease. Seeing things in the sky that I thought couldn't have been ball lightning or some effed up weather. Being on the lake, you feel like you're being watched. And other people I've talked to who live in that area have reported some paranormal encounters. A dog-like creature on all fours staring at me and my husband driving by this wooded field. Then it stood and stared at us. We just kept driving after we stopped briefly to look at it. Its eyes were glowing. Wish I had taken a picture of it. This happened in an area where Skyline Drive is closed in Virginia. A very strange looking creature. Glowing eyes, matted brown fur, long legs, claws on the hands or paws, large size, looked like part man, very strange looking. It scared the both of us. Never seen anything like it before or again. Had what might have been a Sasquatch encounter as a kid, except they didn't fit the common description. They were tall, their hair and fur was white, their skin was dark and bluish gray. Their eyes were larger, like something aquatic. They seemed calm and intelligent. Their behavior was not like that of animals. The way they moved around was strange, as if they were gliding around the ground. Never understood what they were, but they definitely saw me and interacted with me and the environment. I remember it was cold and their breath was freezing in the air, same as mine. Back when I was younger, I saw a skunk ape coming from Daytona, Florida in the Ocala National Forest area. When you can hear it breathing 100 feet away but can't see it through the foliage, it was chasing a black bear because I heard the bear squalling at a distance. The lung capacity was incredible. Less than 20 feet away, around 2 a.m. in Clark County, Kentucky, my friend and I were cruising the back roads in his new VW Beetle, about a foot of snow on the ground and snowing. It was a process of going over a fence on a hillside. It was huge, black, and not happy. Had an encounter near Ellsworth, Maine in 2007-2008, right in front of my car. Close. I had to brake so I wouldn't hit it. Had something walk up to me while deer hunting one morning. I could hear it, but didn't see a thing. Dry leaves and heavy footsteps. Creepy. Saw the Montauk monster about 15 years ago while pregnant with my son. I had something walk to my camp years ago on 2 heavy feet. The next morning, I found 18-inch tracks. Ohio. My oldest daughter and my husband, just a few days apart at our house we used to live in. We had lots of trees in the backyard, and my daughter was outside, and I was watching over her. Next thing, I saw her walk very fast like something was chasing her. When she made it inside, I heard a horrible roar sound. Something moved in the bushes, then silent. My husband was taking a walk, and basically the same thing happened to him. He's a skeptic, so for him to say something was in the bushes where he was walking, then crazy animal noises being heard, he didn't walk in that direction anymore. He said later that a guy on his bus that lived a few blocks away said he saw a large creature in his backyard, and he would have swore with a large cat. It was late at night, but he didn't think anyone would believe him until my husband was telling him about the close walk in between our homes. 3 encounters. Never saw it though. 1. Pitch black. Walked into the woods to relieve myself, and I was doing so, he made a sound like horse does sometimes. Deep, guttural, breathy sound. It was only about 8 feet in front of me and way up off the ground. Scared the you-know-what out of me. I slowly backed up, turned, and ran. I'm sure he or she thought that was funny. Years later, I do too. Number 2. Same yard as number 1. Pulled in and got out of the car. Immediately smelled it. Unmistakable smell. Anyone who's been near a gorilla knows the smell. I ran upwind with my camera and heard it take off. Huge, heavy, leaping steps, but by the time I got to the trees and could see past the bushes in the forest, it was long gone. My friend who was with me was freaked out by the smell. She said she was physically disturbed by it. Number 3. A different state, camping, had to suddenly run up the mountain away from people to deal with a case of giardia. When I had done what I needed to do, I couldn't find my flashlight. I must have tossed it on the ground in my haste to drop true. I looked and looked, checked all my pockets multiple times. I'd sleep with my boots next to my head under my tarp so no other sketchy campers would steal them during the night. I woke up the next morning with my flashlight stuck in one of my boots. I went up the mountain to dig a hole and bury what I left the night before. Then I realized I hadn't left toilet paper roll up there too because it was hanging on a branch that was higher than I was able to reach. I'm 6'1". I told the story to a local elder, and he said the big hairy man must like me because he helped me out instead of tried to trick me. He kind of did both considering the toilet paper. I consider all three encounters to be playful in nature. I welcome the fourth. We heard it, smelt it, saw it. No longer hunt in that area. I seen one. My ex-wife and I looked at each other and both said, "Did you see that?" Yes, they are real. We were on our way home on 208 in Waverly Hall, Georgia. The 18-wheeler came around a bend in the road and the creature walked out from behind the truck. We were about 100 yards from it. I had something throwing rocks at me and growling in 1999. Then I had several encounters over a fall through spring with what I later found out was probably a dogman. That was actually way more terrifying than the rocks being thrown at me. I struggled with what happened in 8 or 09 for years. One time when I was a kid, I saw my grandma. Even though I don't know who she was in the moment, she looked like flesh and blood. Only when my mama took me back to the bedrooms to show me there wasn't anybody there did I realize she wasn't. And I sure felt like I saw something after my mama told me. I described my grandma wearing a dress that she was buried in 30 years before. I don't think it's scary, just comforting. We saw tracks in Texarkana near Boggy Creek. Heard him yell of a yeti from a distance in a clearance. She was real awful yell of a Bigfoot. Had some friends who were camping in a national park area west of Sydney, Australia. They had something up in the trees after dark at their campsite. Made clear they were unwelcome. They got scared, packed up, and hiked out. Said whatever it was followed them to where the parking area was. They couldn't see it because it was dark. I was changing out hot water heaters at our cabin in southern Colorado at 9,000 foot elevation and heard the loudest yell I've ever heard, like a giant exhale, and at the volume of the air coming from him was 5 times what a man could do. Started crashing through the woods like a herd of elk. I jumped up and ran to the sound, and my stupid flashlight was too dim to make it out. Then I saw a deer trailing it. I ran to the cabin, and my wife met me at the door, and I said, "Did you hear that?" She said, "No, but were you on the back deck?" And I said, "No." She said she heard and felt some two-legged running very fast all the way down our 40-foot deck and vibrated so our solid deck every step. Later, I recreated the running on the back deck and I weighed 250 pounds. She said it was heavier and faster. The next year, we was burning brush on our property, and after dark, we were going back to the cabin, and I yelled as loud as I could, imitating the yell, and instantly a yell came back from the woods a mile or two. The exhale yell with a mean growl at the end. About 3 years ago, my cousin and I were driving through the mountains at night near Magdalena, New Mexico. Off the side of the road, we saw a huge Bigfoot-looking creature running. It looked to be at least 9 feet tall and running at about 45 miles per hour. He was brownish, hairy above the waist, and had huge black, hairless legs and thighs. If that wasn't strange enough, it seemed to be phasing in and out into static in the headlights, like a TV with bad reception. It ran behind a huge road sign. It was gone when we drove past the sign, which was only 6-7 seconds later. I went to retrieve a deer that I shot with my bow. When I got to the deer, the stench was so bad that I almost gagged. When I got to the deer, it must have seen me about 20 yards away. Didn't see it, but it was mowing over trees running away. Third interaction in the same spot 3 years in a row. I heard a howl at 200 yards and tree knocking several times. Found a hut built with bent olive trees. There was many bones inside. I seen tracks and something big. I know where something is living. I was not alone that day. My friend seen it too. We returned 2 other times close to their first encounter location and seen signs of the creature. I did get it to knock back to me. 2 of my friends heard the knock too. 3 years ago, my wife and I were hiking in the Wayne National Forest around Lake Vesuvius in Ohio. And about 2/3 the way around the lake, we were walking below a high wall and a creek on the other side of us, and we heard something that sounded like a huge frisbee going over our heads and make a huge splash in the creek on the other side of us. Nothing human could have thrown a boulder that size, that far. We notified the park ranger, and he said there were other reported sightings there also. In May 2007, I was driving home from the police academy. I would take the scenic route for a bit, but decided to get back on the highway. As I was coming to an intersection in a forested rural area, I turned right in about 30 seconds or so in my rear view mirror to see the biggest guy I've ever seen. The creature had the darkest fur in hot May. It crossed the road. I stopped and got out as it was entering the tree line. There happened to be another driver behind, but he was far enough behind for the creature to pass between. He got out asking if I saw the same thing. We both heard the thing walking away through the forest. Eyeshine leading to a partial body visual. Sam Houston National Forest, Texas, 2021. I've been followed through the woodland by something large that was grunting. Wood knocks, a very bad reeking stench, 3 shrieking howls within a quarter mile. Me and 11 others on a BFRO campout in Minnesota. My dad has tracked Bigfoot since he moved to Aberdeen, Washington when he was around 12 years old. He once told me a story. He was on a cliff overlooking a wooded area below and saw a Bigfoot and yelled down to him. My dad said the guy looks over his shoulder, raises his hand to probably block out the sun, and then runs after my dad. Erie, east shore of Lake Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. The closest was about 8 feet away, looking at me through the kitchen window. It was a rainy, stormy night. In 1981-1982, canoeing after midnight on Cedar Creek, Ohio, screaming and howling at my friend alongside a creek, busting limbs off of trees for about 10 to 15 minutes. I have never been back in that area, scared the living crap out of us. My 2 encounters were in the Pine Barrens of South New Jersey while bow hunting. Myself and 2 friends were lined up approximately 150 yards apart, me being the deepest on the edge of the drop to the river, basically a saddle between 2 steep ravines. I heard the birds singing, crickets chirping, and then the woods went totally silent. The squatch howled. Literally, I could feel it vibrating on my chest, looking through the woods all around me for the source. I finally saw the creature, the squatch, standing less than 30 feet away, peeking out from a massive oak tree. It was between 7 and 9 feet tall, muscular, conical head, almost human facial features, brown piercing eyes. We stared at each other for what seemed to be 15 to 20 minutes, till it huffed and ran off towards the scrub oaks. Then I got out of the tree stand and walked backwards to my closest friend. He asked, "Did you hear that?" I told him what I saw. He literally jumped out of his tree stand, and while we walked, one of us watched our 6, while the other friend also asked if we heard anything. Told him the squatch was definitely following us as we left the area. The second encounter was a female and young squatch, 2 total. She was smashing logs to distract me while bow hunting the same day. My area is still there, and I haven't been back. I've had 5 encounters in northern British Columbia, with a total of 8 beings from 2008 to 2019. I live in Quesnel, British Columbia, where the huge, muddy Fraser River and the clear blue-green of the Quesnel River meet. When my aunt was young, she had a reoccurring encounter with a juvenile Sasquatch. Fouke, Arkansas, 1922. When I was 18, my father, 6'9", Native American, his younger brother, a buddy of mine, and a neighbor, and his daughter went to the Black Hills of Wyoming around Devil's Tower for a hunting trip. Me and my bud had to sleep in a tent, no room in the RV. A very cold October night, we get up there and set up camp. Me and my buddy get our tent set up, and I told him we're sleeping in there, he better pack warm. We get to bed early because the next morning is the first day of the hunt. Late that night, it was a great big silvery, bright, shiny moon, so bright you could see without the sun. It was absolutely bright. And sound asleep because I'm not feeling the cold sometime in the wee hours of the morning. Then there's a slight hill on my head and slid the lower corner of the tent. And all of a sudden, I was being hit on the head hard enough it rolled me out of my bed and into the middle of the tent. It felt like someone had walked up and kicked me as hard as he could in the tent. I had a knot on the top of my head for the rest of the camping trip from when this happened. I woke up cussing and screaming at my buddy, thinking somehow he had done this. After him trying to shut me up and keep me quiet, he finally told me what had happened. He was freezing. He couldn't get to sleep. He thought he heard my dad walking towards the tent. He could see because of the moon and the figure walking towards the tent. Because of the size and my dad's height, he thought it was my dad. He realized it was getting closer and bigger and got clean. It wasn't my dad. He blocked out the moon, blocked out all of it, about 9 feet tall. Whatever it was, walked by and hit me on the head, snapped a 3/4 inch triple braid rope. So after an hour of nervous anxiety, we were able to get back to sleep. The next morning, everybody went down their own direction. I went down towards the valley, a little creek, looking for some white-tailed deer. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was very intently watching me. It was so strongly that it physically hurt. I would stop, and I would look around, and I would check. I could see nothing, no animals, no nothing, so I continued on the walk. Over a mile from camp, I could see it, because it was down in the valley. I started walking along the brush line in the cattails. I could hear a little creek in the flowing. So I slowly walked in the creek, hoping I would jump something out. And I noticed the brush and cattails were starting to get thinner. I could see lights breaking through the cattails. I probably walked another 20 to 30 yards, thinking that something was still watching me. I looked back to the creek and the cattails. I saw a huge outline of a very large thing, bent over just enough below the tops of the brush, but you could see the legs, you could see the torso, you could see the shape of the head. I was 20 feet away, and from this day I never smelled anything. You can kind of see it swaying back and forth in the brush. It was about 6.5, 7 feet tall, the cattails, and he was bent over, looking to stay above the top of him. It scared me so bad I forgot I had a high-powered rifle with me. I slowly backed up away so I felt safe, headed back towards camp, realizing the whole time this thing was walking the creek following me back to camp. I stopped when I hit the edge of the brush and the cattails, and it watched me all the way home. Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out yetibars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti bars!
flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.